real parents, real stories. It's the Meet the Parents podcast.
Hello and welcome to episode 30 of the Meet the Parents podcast. We're back after a week off. Did you miss us? With another 30 minutes of parenting chat from some of the UK's top parent bloggers. I'm Tim from Slouching Towards Thatcham, and this evening I'm talking with Dave from The Dadventurer and Vicky from Verily Victoria Vocalisers. Good evening, both of you.
Good evening, Tim.
Hello there.
So, on this week's podcast, we're going to talk about a couple of stories that have been in the news over the past couple of weeks. One about the potential for introducing a shorter school week, and the other about the growth of video blogging or vlogging as a way for engaging audiences. So, as ever, the beginning of September sees a big focus on back to school for many families, with a new influx of kids starting primary and secondary school, and the obligatory photos of children showing off their new school uniform. But back to school is a period also accompanied by a succession of school and education related stories, and this year was no exception. So, we're going to skip over the great grammar school debate tonight, as I think that's probably been done to death by now. But there was one other story that caught my eye, and that was the growing momentum behind calls for a 4.5-day school week. Now, the background behind this is that there's been some research in the US that suggests that students who have a 4 rather than a 5-day school week can achieve better results. And some schools, both across the pond and here in the UK, have already started to move towards this. So, Scottish Borders Council adopted a 4.5-day school week 2 years ago, and this summer Angus Council in Scotland also voted to move its secondary schools to a 4.5-day week as of next August, although the primary motivation seems to be the need to save money rather than targeting improving academic standards. So, now we're reading that schools in Wales, both primary and secondary, may soon follow suit, with a report published by the Public Policy Institute for Wales, who were commissioned to look into the pros and cons of what's called an asymmetric school week. So, before we get into the detail of this, have you got any initial thoughts on this as an idea? Is it good? Is it bad? Is it a little bit of both? Dave, any thoughts?
Well, I don't have a school-age child yet. I think ultimately there's always a need to sort of improve how we do things, and just because we've always done things in a certain way, it doesn't mean that's how we should always continue to do them. So I think on the whole it's good that they're looking into it. Whether it's bad for parents or kids, I wouldn't quite know yet. What do you think, Vic?
I have to say I don't personally think it's a good idea. At the moment, the school week as it stands works perfectly fine. There's nothing wrong with the system as far as I can see. And if it isn't broken, why fix it? I mean, I can see the main reason that's come out of the report that they want to save money. But I actually think that the more important thing here is how the kids respond to it. And I think having this sort of chop and changing of days I don't think it's conducive to anything. And if it is just to save money and then not looking at the academic side of things, okay, if it's worked in the States, that's fine, but their education system is different to ours anyway. But I just don't think personally it's a good idea.
Okay, so why don't we delve a little bit deeper into the findings of the Welsh report? So it cites 3 main reasons for adopting an asymmetric school week, which would probably take the form of 4 slightly longer days for Monday to Thursday, and then a shorter one finishing at lunchtime on Friday. So the 3 reasons given in support of such a move are: 1, opportunities for financial savings; 2, improved opportunities for continuing professional development of teachers; and then 3, dedicated time for enrichment activities for children. Now, what the report doesn't include is any significant discussion about raising academic standards. Now, that's probably as much an indication of the small sample size of the US studies, but as you just mentioned, Vic, I think it's also telling that the opportunity for financial savings is listed first, rather than what the potential benefits for children or for teachers are. And at a time when schools face tighter budgets than ever, there's obviously a bit here of, I guess, local authorities preparing for a future where belt tightening continues to be a reality, and a shorter school week could be one way to trim costs without sacrificing money that might be spent on, say, textbooks or computers or sports equipment. So do we think that a shorter school week might in some ways be the least worst solution to make budgets go further in the event of further cuts?
Well, I have to say, it's all very well them saying it's financial savings for them, but what about the parents who work, who then need to find either childcare for extra expense or cut short their working hours, which then lessens their money? So, you've got to look at everybody involved in this process. And also, I just, they're saying about, it makes you wonder also, I'd be interested to know whether or not they're saying that it would improve opportunities for continuing professional development of the teachers. But does that mean then they'll do away with the inset days, or will they carry on? Because you can't have it both ways as far as I'm concerned. There's days when inset days I have to sort of lessen my workload and make sure there's somebody around for grace. So it makes you wonder whether or not that's going to happen as well.
And Dave, I mean, obviously Toddlerell is a couple of years from going to school herself, but any thoughts on how this might potentially impact the way that you manage her childcare at the moment?
Well, it's obviously definitely something that needs to be considered. If you're losing half a day, for instance, during the 5 days of the week, as Vicky says, that means you're having to cover that somehow. As a stay-at-home dad at the moment, that's fine. I can do that myself. But if I was then looking to work in the future, or needed to get the extra place at nursery or whatever, it's all financial considerations and other things that have got to be thought about. It's an interesting one because over the past 5+ years, when you look at the public sector as a whole, there's just been all of the sort of like the financial cuts with everything, and I've done quite a bit of work with the police before, and I sort of look at it similar to that to an extent, that you've got a finite resource and growing expectations and growing needs. So it's about how can you best place the money, the limited money that you've got, and make that as beneficial to as many people as possible. And obviously we've seen the examples with the police where they've cut police numbers. So you'd look at that from an outsider perspective and say, well, you want more police on the streets rather than less, but they've had to come up with other ways of dealing with it.
Now, I should point out that when Dave says he's worked with the police before, he doesn't mean helping them with their inquiries. But it is a really difficult situation, isn't it? And, when I think about it, I just don't know. I can see that this could be a pragmatic solution that would be reasonably easy for schools to implement. And anything that means that schools don't have to cut back spending on essentials is obviously a good thing. But, at the same time, I do worry that the focus and the language of this report seems to be more about crunching numbers than it is about focusing on what's best for school children and, as Vicky says, the knock-on effect on the parents and the families. It does say a lot about the impoverished state of education in the UK that saving money is cited as the prime benefit of such a move, doesn't it? In fairness, I should also say the report doesn't just talk about the benefits of an asymmetric week. It does also list the potential downsides, and the key concerns it raises being access to childcare, which Vicky's already touched upon, the impact of the length of the school day, transport availability, and the potential loss of extracurricular activities. So let's start with access to childcare. Now, a shorter day on a Friday would clearly have a significant impact on families where there isn't an at-home parent, and it would certainly cause us problems. We're a household where both of us work during the day, and in our case it would mean one or both of us changing our working arrangements, or it would mean placing an additional financial burden on us to arrange additional childcare on a Friday at our own cost. And I have to wonder, is there really enough extra infrastructure to cope with the additional influx of kids who would inevitably need after school care on a Friday? It's not like you can just employ anyone off the streets to work in childcare. This isn't stacking shelves in Tesco, and I suspect that would probably only lead to the price of childcare going up, and it's already pretty expensive as it is. So any thoughts on that from either of you?
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with you on the fact that it's going to put a lot of pressure on parents who work during the day. I mean, with Grace's school, they all finish at 25 to 4. Then all they've got is an extended learning club, 1 day a week for each year. So they're only there for an extra hour, but other than that, they don't have anything extra after school. But with regards to the childcare itself, I mean, luckily enough, Ross and I both work from home, so we're fine with that. But it does mean that we have to it does disrupt my workflow when Grace comes in. There's no question about it. But if she's coming in earlier, for example, then, I'm going to have less time where I'm going to be able to focus on what I'm doing. And so will Ross. But if she comes in later again, I just don't think having a longer school day is a good idea either.
Do we know if this is, are we talking about primary or secondary school here? Because, based on the childcare type of thing, if you're talking about a 14-year-old, I would think that they'd be all right to, get the bus home or, have keys to get in the house and stuff. I think, it feels like it could be a slightly different argument if you're looking at secondary versus primary, but I don't know what this study was suggesting.
I think that's a really good point about the difference between primary and secondary school children. I think the changes that are already in the process have been put in place in Scotland focus only on secondary schools, whereas the study in Wales was looking at the potential, and I should stress it is only the potential for doing it for both primary and secondary schools, and absolutely for primary school children, you can't just give them a key and expect them to walk home and let themselves in. Yeah, and Vicky, just now you touched upon one of the other concerns that was raised, the impact of a longer school day. So the way I think the proposal would work would be that you'd look at saving 2 to 2.5 hours on a Friday by finishing at lunchtime, but then you would absorb those hours into the first 4 days of the week. So, that's probably an extra 30 to 40 minutes a day, which would probably come in the form of both a slightly later finish to the day and then possibly also a slightly shorter lunch break. So any thoughts on the impact that might have, either positive or negative?
I find it a bit sort of hypocritical because they don't want children to come home in the dark and they made all this great big campaign about it for years, and then all of a sudden they now want them to come home in the dark. So I don't know, I just find it a bit strange.
And my fear would be that they would do less of adding time on to the end of the day and more of maybe shaving a few minutes off morning break and making lunch hour 40 or 45 minutes, say. And, that worries me in two respects. It worries me because, break times are an important part of the day for children to recharge, to prepare themselves for the afternoon, to run around and blow off a bit of steam and have a bit of exercise in the playground. And and also a lot of clubs and music lessons and all this kind of stuff takes place at lunchtime as well. And I really struggle in that. It's, overall I can see at the moment more concerns than benefits. On the one hand, you could argue that a 4.5 day week might allow for a bit more recharging time over what would be a slightly longer weekend. But equally, I can remember that in the first term of the boys' first years at school, that they really struggled with the intensity of even an ordinary length school day, never mind an extended one. One of the other concerns was the availability of transport. So that again leads to some complexities. It may well be that local authorities may need to lay on additional school buses to cover the end of the shorter school day on the Friday, with parents not necessarily being able to pick up children. And I wonder if that any extra cost that's incurred there might outweigh the savings that you get by running the shorter week. Plus, a later school day, as you say, it means kids are more likely to be going home in the dark in the middle of winter, and later finishes on the other 4 days might push school run traffic closer to rush hour traffic, which could have a negative effect on traffic levels and and road safety potentially around schools. Any final thoughts on this from either of you?
I'd just say it feels a little bit like it's just displacing the cost. The school might make the saving, but as you just touched upon with the transport, it just feels like they're making them savings themselves by just forcing the money out onto other people.
It does feel a little bit like robbing Peter to pay Paul, doesn't it?
That's exactly the expression I was going to use. Yeah, totally.
And it's funny, isn't it? I mean, on the face of it, trimming a few minutes here and adding a few minutes there may not seem like such a big deal, but I suspect the ramifications of it could actually be quite far-reaching. So, following the publication of this policy report, walesonline.co.uk have been running a poll asking readers whether they think that a change to a 4.5-day week would be a good idea. So I had a quick check of it earlier this afternoon, and the split was 52-48 in favour. Now, there's a familiar percentage split, and we all know how divisive a 52-48 vote was during the whole Brexit affair. Now, I'm not suggesting that they should be having a referendum on it, but do we think that the authorities' decision should in any way be influenced by popular opinion? And, would something that really is so close to 50-50 be a major cause for concern for them, should they want to enforce the change?
Yeah, I do. I think if it's that close a split, and there's 50% nearly of the people who are against it, I mean, let's face it, like you said, it's only a very small minority, then they really need to think about this seriously before they make any changes to this.
So it'll be interesting to see, I think, what impact the changes have in Scotland, and whether Wales makes any moves to follow suit following this initial report. So even more, it will be interesting to see if councils in England then start to consider that as a potential option as well. So as they say, watch this space.
There are hundreds of books on the market offering parents advice, but now here's one aimed squarely at toddlers. The Toddler Rulebook is packed with helpful hints to help little people find their way in the world and reduce mummy and daddy's dependency on wine and gin. From learning to accept that your parents are always right even when they're not, to recognising each of the 50 shades of no. This is a must-read for bedtimes. So say goodbye to your Gruffalo and your BFG, and get your parents to order a copy of the Toddler Rulebook today. Available in no good bookshops, or even bad ones.
Moving on to a somewhat different topic, aside from this podcast, Vicky, Dave and I are all united by the fact that we write blogs about our experiences as parents. Now, blogging is still a relatively young medium. The word weblog was only coined in 1997. Its shortened form blog came into being 2 years later, and blogging itself has only really taken off in the last decade. But it's positively aged compared to its video counterpart, the vlog, which has really taken off in the past few years as first YouTube and then high-speed broadband have hit the mainstream. Now, I read an article in The Telegraph the other week about the latest venture of NetMum's founder Siobhan Freegard, which is an online video channel called Channel Mum. Established in 2015, it launched with the aim of signing a roster of UK mummy vloggers and helping them build their audiences while working with popular brands to sponsor their videos. Now, Freegard has just secured £2 million worth of funding to push the business to the next level. And video is very much a growth medium right now, with initiatives such as this and the growth of Facebook Live, Periscope, and even Instagram Stories for telling stories by video. Not to mention the continuing growth of YouTube, which is now the world's second largest search engine behind only its parent company, Google. I'm definitely not a video person. You've probably heard me say many times that I have a face for radio and a voice for silent movies, but both of you have gotten involved in vlogging. Indeed, Vicky, I think you're one of the 250 or so vloggers who are listed on Channel Mum. So let's start with you. What is it that encouraged you to start vlogging in the first place, and what sort of things do you vlog about?
I think really for me it was more of an emotional situation when I started vlogging properly, and that was only around the end of last year, where I started vlogging on a regular basis, and that's obviously about our conception journey, trying to have a baby. And the reason I've done that is really more as I think when you see the face of somebody, you can hear their voice, especially if it's something so emotive as I've started vlogging about. You understand more the emotion behind it. I mean, words can paint a picture, and people can write so eloquently. And then when you look at vlogging as a separate medium, it just spins a whole different story on a situation. And I think that's really why. And also one day, because I've written about it, I also one day, when we are successful, cross fingers, I want, obviously our child will know how it came into the world, and I want them to understand how emotive it was for us. And I think it's, for some people it's easier for them just to sit down and watch a video than it is to read a piece of writing. So you'll get different audiences for different reasons and different things.
Okay, so Dave, how about you? You've also taken up vlogging relatively recently, so tell us a little bit more about what's got you into that and the kind of things that you're focusing on at the moment.
It's all a bit random, if I'm honest. I don't really have a set way of how I want to do things or whatever. It's more that vlogging is the offshoot of blogging. So I've felt that I need to create a few videos and stuff like that to try it out, to try and reach a different audience and appeal to different brands who are potentially more interested in video content than written content nowadays. So I haven't done that many videos. I'm still messing with it and tinkering, but what I'd quite like to do is get to a point where I can turn some of my best blog posts into like equivalent vlogs. So trying to come from the light-hearted, humorous angle of things, and basically use my daughter in that way.
And Dave, I mean, how would you say that doing videos is different to writing a blog?
It's a different thought process. It's with a blog, like obviously everybody does it in different ways, but if I look at how I do it, I come up with an idea, and almost over the course of a week or whatever, I'll sort of start writing it in my head. So I'll have little sort of nuggets that I want to pick up on in the post. So when I actually sit down to write something, I've got a structure there in my head already. With the vlogging side of things, it's a bit more random for me. So today we went to Beck and Scott, and I got the video camera out today and just shot a few things just to sort of, again, tinker with putting a vlog together for a day out. So the thought process behind that was very much get the camera out and just take video where I can. So I've come back today, stuck it onto my laptop, and ended up with like best part of 100 different clips, which I've now got to edit into some type of form when I don't know what I want to say, if you know what I mean. So I'm finding it a different type of thought process. So I'd say that's the main difference for me between blogging and vlogging.
I guess, Vicky, it must be quite similar for you. It's quite a different thought process, but also quite a different technical process, isn't it?
Yeah, totally. I mean, I'm one of those people, I haven't got a lot of patience with sitting there and editing something for ages on end. I just don't have, A, the time, or B, the sort of the energy to do it. Ross is really good at it. I mean, he edits a lot of the stuff that we do on a bigger scale. So when we went to Ireland recently, he put our video together for that. And actually he put Grace's video together for our homework for this week. But I like the sort of the straightforward stuff that doesn't take too much time.
That's where I struggle with the vlogging. It's the talking to camera, which obviously is a big part of vlogging, if you don't know. But it's I'm not too good at, when the camera's there, just being able to talk. So I need to script things that little bit more. So again, I guess it's similar to how I write a blog post, that I've got a couple of sort of ideas, but it probably takes me the best part of 20 different takes before I get the one I want, and then it's just about deleting loads of stuff and keeping the 3 clips that actually worked out how I thought it might do.
I have to admit, I don't watch a lot of vlogs myself. Do either of you watch a lot of vlogs yourself? And what are the sort of ones that really kind of catch your eye and that you really like?
Yeah, I watch quite a few, actually. I like having a selection to be able to see, and there's such a variety on there. I don't like it if they're too long. I mean, sort of 6 minutes is probably my limit, to be honest. But there's review videos, there's people who go on... I love people who go on days out. I love those types of videos, so I can look around a place. And I also... sort of like a good story or follow a journey. So yeah, that's the type of things I like.
I'm going to sound really bad here. I don't actually watch any vlogs. which may explain why I'm not the best at doing it myself. But no, I much prefer to read things. So I understand, like, nowadays with the YouTube is a younger generation thing, and I think it's about just being able to take content in without necessarily having to do anything. But that's not really how my mind works. I much prefer to read something, and I get a little bit bored with videos. So obviously, there's a lot of good vloggers out there, and I have seen videos. But I prefer to read blog posts than watch vlogs.
Okay, so Vicky, if we talk about Channel Mum for a minute, what would you say that something like that offers that maybe is a little bit different to what YouTube does?
With Channel Mum, it's less overwhelming. YouTube is quite overwhelming with what's on there. There's so much content on there that you don't know quite where to start. It gets a bit overwhelming. Whereas with Channel Mum, because it's a specific network of people, it's much easier to get noticed.
Yeah, and I guess it's a bit more focused in terms of content and audience, in the same way that when you look at TV channels, you have things like CBeebies or, all the other focus channels that you have that offer very specific content to a very specific audience. Whereas, as you say, YouTube is pretty much all-encompassing and can swallow up hours and hours of your time on things that you weren't intending to watch in the first place.
So true.
Yeah. Welcome to my Saturday nights, people. Now, there are a handful of dad vloggers in among the featured channels on Channel Mum. It is dominated by mums, maybe even more so than the parent blogging world is. Dave, have you got any thoughts as to why there aren't more dad vloggers?
I think over the last year I've seen more and more dads getting in front of the camera, and it almost feels like it's the new generation of dad bloggers who are more than happy to get in front of the camera as well. So whereas, like, say yourself, Tim, who's been blogging for a while, and myself, who's sort of been 2.5 years now, it started out as blogging and has branched into vlogging, whereas I think people now are looking at it, like dads are looking at it now and going, well, a blog is almost equal as a vlog, and then it's which medium they feel most comfortable with. So I think a lot of the mums who are on Channel Mum and stuff like that are established mummy bloggers on the whole, but there's not that many established dad bloggers who've also taken to camera. It's more the upcoming newbie dads, if you know what I mean by that. I think something where Channel Mum is obviously good is it's go back to the likes of Brit Mums, Net Mums, Mumsnet, etc. It's about taking a group of people and bringing them together, and that's exactly what Channel Mum's done. Dads on the whole and men on the whole aren't as good as that within the blogging world from what I've established. So you've not got your equivalent Dadsnet or whatever, and I think it's just the same within the video world, that there's not something there which is a Channel Mum for dads.
But maybe, as you say, as more and more dads come onto the blogging scene and choose to use vlogs as well as, or maybe even instead of blogs, we'll see more dad vloggers out there in the future. So before we wrap this section up, where can people find your vlogs, Dave?
That's a good question. On YouTube. let me double check. I am, quite surprisingly, the Dadventurer. I wasn't sure whether I had an underscore in there or not, but I haven't.
And Vicky?
You'll just find me under my name, Victoria Welton. If you just search for that, that's my channel.
So there you have it. If our dulcet vocal tones aren't enough for you on a weekly basis, do seek out Dave and Vicky's vlogs as well on YouTube. So I would warn you, though, it's probably best to watch out for the one of Dave in his wife's pink dressing gown. There are some things that once you've seen them can never be undone. So before we go, what have we been all up to recently, Dave?
So last week I went to Blog on MSI in Manchester, which is a blogging conference. Saw your good self there, Tim, which is always a pleasure. So I was up to Manchester for the weekend and learning a few different things about various aspects of blogging and vlogging, and catching up with a few people, so that was pretty cool. This weekend we went to Beaconscott, like I mentioned earlier, so a model village type thing, which isn't too far from us. First time we've been there, pretty cool. I'd say check it out. That's about it, really.
Cool. And how about you, Vicky?
Well, funnily enough, just talking about vlogs, I've just recorded a couple more because I'm just about to start up my Conception Diaries series again. As of next weekend, it will be back. And a couple of weeks ago, I went and helped out at the Mad Blog Awards, which was fabulous.
How were the awards?
Yeah, really good, actually. Really good. I was doing a lot of running around because I was actually there working, so I was trying to make sure the presenters were ready to go up on stage to get up for the next award. So I was just making sure I knew where they all were, on which tables and that type of thing. I helped set up a lot of the stuff. And actually, I also had the chance to present an award, so I actually got on the stage, which was fab.
Excellent. So as for me, I've had a hectic couple of weeks, actually. I've been away in Germany most of this week. As it happens, staying in the same hotel as the Barcelona football team. Now, no one tried to call me up to take the place of the injured Lionel Messi. Obviously, there was some oversight there. And as David said, the weekend before, I was also up at the Museum of Science and Industry in Manchester at the blogging conference Blog on MSI, where I was presenting one of the sessions. So, do you know what? It's been quite nice to be back home the past couple of days with my feet up in front of Strictly, to be honest. And that's it for another episode of the Meet the Parents podcast. We'll be back next week, but in the meantime, here's where you can find the three of us online.
I'm at thedadventurer.com and Twitter at _dadventurer.
You'll find me on my blog, Verily Victoria Vocalises, and that's VEVIVOS.com, and on Twitter at Vic Welton.
And finally, I'm at slouchingtowardsthatcham.com, and you can find me on Twitter at ThatchamDad. So you can download this podcast on iTunes and Android devices, on our website at meettheparentspodcast.com, and via a variety of podcasting apps. Do also please give us a follow on Twitter at Parents Podcast and Facebook at facebook.com/meettheparentspodcast. So thanks for listening, and do please join us again next week. Good night.